Okay, this is going to be a hard one to talk about, but here we go. Welcome back, everybody, to 31 70s horror movies for Halloween, where I talk about my favorite horror movies from the 1970s. So today, at number 9, we're talking about one of the most notorious movies in the rape revenge genre, and that is I Spit on Your Grave.
I don't like women giving me orders. Shit.
This is a very unsettling movie, as people know. It's very notorious for being a rape revenge movie. It is probably the most notorious rape revenge movie after Last House on the Left. Yeah, I mean, I have this at number 9 because this is one of the horror movies that has affected me the most. It is one of the most disturbing movies I've ever seen. The reason I have it above Last House on the Left, because a lot of people consider Last House on the Left better than I Spit on Your Grave, and that's usually held in higher regards. But the reason I have I Spit on Your Grave so high on the list is that when it comes to rape revenge movies, I prefer when it's the victim getting revenge. Because, like, in Last House on the Left, okay, you have a girl who is attacked and assaulted by a group of robbers, but she's killed, and then her parents are the ones who get revenge. I prefer it when it's the person who was a victim of assault is the one who gets revenge on her attackers. This is a movie that, if I come across somebody and they say they hate this movie, I completely understand. I understand why so many people don't like this movie. I never like to argue with people when they say they don't like a movie, because if you don't like a movie, it's your taste. Okay, you don't like it, you don't like it. That's, it's nothing wrong with that. But, I do like to have discussions with people. It's like, okay, you don't like this movie, okay, here's why I like this movie. And, of course, there's nothing wrong with discussion. But when it comes to I Spit on Your Grave, when someone says they hate this movie, all I can say is, I get it. Okay, I understand. And because, the reason people don't like it is because they don't like rape in their movies, which I understand. But I always do make the argument that I Spit on Your Grave is not a bad movie. I actually think it's a very good horror movie and a very effective horror movie with what it's trying to do.
Okay, fucking asshole, just grab her leg.
It's very notorious, so we all know the premise. We have this woman named Jennifer, played by Camille Keaton, who goes to this cabin in the woods to work on a new writing project. She's a writer for a magazine in New York, and she comes to this cabin in New York, or near New York, or whatever, and she is, getting some solitude to work on a novel. And while she's there, she runs into a group of men who are sexist pigs who assault her. And then in the second half, she gets her revenge on them.
Oh, look what she's done to me! Oh, shit!
I think this is a very haunting movie. I think it's one of the most haunting horror movies I've ever seen, and that's why I have it so high on my list. So the scene in question where she is assaulted is very hard to watch. When it comes to the subject of rape in horror movies, there are ways to do it. There are two ways that you can do it right, and of course there's a way you can do it wrong. There are directors out there who they'll put rape in a movie as a way to sneak nudity in their film, and that's not the right way to do it. I mean, there are so much better ways to get nudity in your film that doesn't involve assault. Of course, okay, the actress isn't really being assaulted, but it's unnecessary to put a rape scene in a movie just for the sake of putting nudity in there. The two ways to do it right are either make it more suggested, which I think a lot of us prefer, or to show it in its brutality, which is what I Spit on Your Grave does. There are people who make the argument that the scene in question is made to be sexy, and that could not be farther from the truth. There is nothing sexy about it. Yes, Jennifer is naked, but she's also covered in mud, she's been beaten down. They capture this act in all the brutality and ugliness and horror that it should be treated with. I think the thing that makes it even harder is they focus a lot on Jennifer's face. They force the audience to make eye contact with her while she's going through this. So while it's happening, the audience is making a connection with Jennifer while it's happening, and it makes it even harder for the audience because that's when you get that feeling of, I want to stop this, I want to help her, but you can't because it's in a TV screen. You can't do anything about it. So in a way, I Spit on Your Grave makes the audience just as helpless as Jennifer when that scene is happening. Now, I will say that scene is my least favorite scene in the movie, but I mean that as a compliment, because that's how effective the scene is. The directing in this movie, I think, is fantastic, because one of the shots that always stuck with me was when Jennifer first arrives at the cabin where she's staying, and there's like a river right behind her, and when she first gets there, like she's in the middle of nature, she rips her clothes off and runs into the water. Now, most of the time when something like that happens in a horror movie, the director would go in closer. It was like, oh hey, let's look at some tits and ass. But here it doesn't. She takes off her clothes, she runs into the water, and then the camera backs away. It shows how isolated she is, shows that she's surrounded by nature, and that shot always stuck with me. The scene that the movie is notorious for is hard to watch, but as soon as we get through that, I love seeing the revenge. I think this is the best rape revenge movie, and it has some of the best revenge. A lot of people complain about how Jennifer, she lures these men in with her body. She gets naked, she has sex with one of them, but she lures them in. She uses her sexuality to lure them in. And a lot of people complain about that, but what Jennifer is doing is she's using what they took from her to get revenge on them, and making them just as vulnerable as she was, when she's getting revenge on them. And I think that's an interesting way to do it. And the revenge scenes are very haunting. They're very haunting. They do stick with you. There's this one element from the movie that I think it creates an interesting conversation, because there's a character in this movie named Matthew who's mentally challenged, and he's friends with the guys who go after Jennifer, and he participates in the rape. It asks an interesting moral question. Does the mentally challenged guy deserve to have revenge put on him? Because on the one hand, this guy is mentally a child, but on the other hand, he did force himself on another human being. But on the other hand, he was heavily influenced by the assholes he hangs out with. But then on the other hand, he did do it of his own free will.
I have no friends now because of you.
Why, Matthew? Why because of me?
I was chosen to kill you, and I didn't.
You will this time, Matthew. You will.
I lean on the side of, yes, he does deserve it, but, it still creates an interesting conversation. Because, again, the reason I think he deserved it is because he knew it was wrong, but he did it anyway. And again, the revenge is just so haunting, and I think Camille Keaton does a great job as Jennifer. I always thought it was a shame that she didn't appear in more movies after this one, because I think she's a great actress. She captures fear very well. And of course, like I said, you have the scene where she hangs Matthew. You have the scene in the bathtub, which I won't go into too much detail, but yes, I mean, I know I'm going to have a lot of eyebrows raised for putting I Spit on Your Grave so high on my list. I mean, it made the top 10.
Forgive me.
But again, I've never had too many horror movies affect me this way. There's only a handful of horror movies that have affected me this way. And I think it has a fantastic female lead. The villains, you hate them for the right reasons. And it makes you uncomfortable because it forces you to hang out with the villains as much as Camille Keaton. So, there's this weird dynamic there. The revenge is fantastic. It's not one that I would recommend watching around Halloween because it is hard to watch. I'm not saying you shouldn't watch it. I mean, if you don't like rape revenge movies, then by all means don't see it. I get it. Again, I 100% understand why people do not like this movie. But it's one of those movies where if you haven't seen it and you're curious, I'd say do some research first. Do a little research, go into it, see if it's something that you actually want to see before getting into it.
Johnny made me do it. I didn't want to do it. He made me do it.
Suck it, bitch.